Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to look at a really fascinating structural breakdown of an ancient text. Instead of viewing Surah 4 of the Quran as just a dogmatic list of rules, our source material actually analyzes it as an architectural manual. Think of it less like a textbook and more like a highly detailed, functional blueprint designed to construct a perfectly just society from the ground up.
Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered what if we've been reading a centuries-old text through completely the wrong lens this whole time? The source material we're digging into today uses a methodology called tasrif. Basically, it's this super interesting analytical tool where you cross-reference Arabic root words across the entire text to find their actual unified functional meanings. And let me tell you, when you apply this method to Surah 4, it creates a massive paradigm shift. It takes what people usually think of as rigid, traditional rules and turns them into this incredibly dynamic blueprint for social equity and accountability.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're rethinking the term An-Nisa. Then we look at the foundation, the single self. Third, the structure, which is all about protecting the vulnerable. Fourth, the framework of roles and justice. And finally, the ultimate goal, building a conscious community.
All right, starting off with Section 1. Rethinking An-Nisa and translating this blueprint.
So the word Nisa actually shows up 25 times in this surah. That's more than anywhere else in the text. Now, traditionally, it's just translated simply as women. But when you apply that tasrif methodology, it reveals something way deeper. The root word, NSA, actually points to manifestations or that which emerges. If we look at it in a societal context, it's really talking about anyone in a position of dependency. It's the people being provided for or the newly emerging vulnerable elements of society. It is absolutely not strictly about biological women. And wow, this is a literal game changer linguistically, because it means this whole text isn't what we thought it was. It's actually an organizational manual showing a community exactly how to organize care, provision, and protection for anyone who happens to be vulnerable or dependent.
Moving right along to Section 2, the foundation, the single self, or laying the groundwork.
The very first verse of this text addresses all of humanity, and it explicitly states that everyone is created from a single self. The Arabic term is nafsin wahidatin. So the absolutely crucial point here is that by establishing this one unified origin for every single human being, the text totally dismantles any claim of inherent superiority. I mean, whether somebody tries to base it on gender, race, social status, it doesn't matter. The text rejects it right at the foundational level. All human accountability has to start with recognizing that we share this single source of life. You simply can't build a just society if you secretly believe one group of people is fundamentally better than another.
That brings us to Section 3, the structure, protecting the vulnerable, which basically acts as the load bearers of this building.
To keep this structure standing upright, the text sets up really strict regulations around economic justice to protect dependents. It over and over again demands the safeguarding of amwal, or assets. This is especially true for orphans, called yatama, essentially anyone without a safety net or support system. The boundaries laid out here are incredibly strict. You are never, ever allowed to consume the wealth of vulnerable people. In fact, our source highlights that unjustly consuming an orphan's assets is literally equated in the text to swallowing fire. That is how seriously this is taken. Also, any inheritance has to be distributed with justice as the absolute controlling condition. The whole pattern we're seeing is that wealth is designed to be a tool for community support. It's supposed to flow to the people who have a right to it. It is never to be used as a tool for exploitation.
Next up, Section 4. Framework, roles, and justice. These are the walls and beams holding it all together.
To really wrap our heads around this framework, we need to contrast two completely different ways of looking at it. The traditional view often reads this text as if it's setting up this rigid biological gender hierarchy. But, based on the source analysis, the Quranic text isn't doing that at all. It's actually focused entirely on functional roles based on your resource capacity, not your biology.
Let's look closely at the term Rijal, which usually gets paired with Nisa. Now, usually this gets translated simply as men, but the functional definition of Rijal, it actually means those who act in a capacity of support or strength. Think of them as the maintainers, the providers, or the legs of a project or a household. The text uses the word qawwamuna, which means the upright maintainers, and it clearly outlines that someone steps into this role based purely on the specific resources or capacity they have available to spend or provide at that exact moment. So, being in the role of Rijal isn't some badge of inherent biological superiority, not at all. It's a really heavy responsibility of service and provision. It just means you're functioning as the structural support.
And this functional framework of justice doesn't just stay inside the house. It also governs the outer walls of the society when dealing with external threats. The text gives a highly structured protocol for managing conflict, which is often tied to the concept of striving, or jihad. And the rules are incredibly clear and entirely defensive. Step 1, self-defense is only authorized when the community is actually attacked. Step 2, you have to investigate carefully. The Arabic word is tabayano, so you don't just blindly assume hostility. The text literally tells them if someone offers you peace, don't say you are not a believer. And step 3, if the aggressors back down and offer peace, you accept it immediately. The text authorizes organized defense, yes, but immediate de-escalation is prioritized above absolutely everything else.
Which leads us to Section 5, the goal, a conscious community, which serves as the roof of our structure.
So what's the point of all this? The ultimate purpose of all these societal rules isn't just about mechanically checking off boxes. It's about developing an internal state called taqwa. Taqwa basically translates to protective mindfulness or conscious awareness. It's the inner compass that governs every single human action, every transaction, and every measure of justice inside this blueprint. Taqwa is what ensures the society's actions don't just become empty rituals. Instead, every interaction, whether you're managing money, helping someone who's dependent, or defending your community, has to be driven by a really deep, conscious commitment to justice and accountability to the sustainer. It is quite literally the protective roof over the entire society.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive difference in perspective we've been talking about. Let's compare the two frameworks side by side. Under hierarchy, the traditional view focuses almost entirely on biological gender, right? But the Quranic view establishes functional roles that stem from, 1, unified human origin. For rules, tradition tends to lean on these legalistic formulas, whereas the text itself zeroes in on protecting assets and the weak. When it comes to authority, the traditional approach often relies on external secondary texts. But this blueprint, it relies on direct dependency on the Quran itself as the absolute standard for resolving any disputes. And lastly, the goal. Instead of just performing rituals, the true goal is taqwa, having that conscious awareness actively manifesting as tangible justice in society.
All of this builds up to what is arguably one of the most critical verses in the entire surah. It sets the ultimate, totally uncompromising standard for the community. Verse 4:135 commands, "O you who are conscious, be upholders of justice, witnesses for Allah, even if against yourselves, your parents, or close relatives." Think about that. It is demanding that truth and justice have to stand head and shoulders above any personal bias, family ties, or self-interest, period. If the foundation is equality and the walls are functional support, then uncompromising justice is the very air you breathe inside this structure.
We've just walked through a seriously fascinating structural analysis of Surah 4. And as we've seen, it's not some arbitrary list of rules. It is a brilliant architectural blueprint for a society that's built on true equality, protecting the vulnerable, functional roles of service, and conscious justice. So I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on today. When you take a step back and evaluate the frameworks, the hierarchies, and the power dynamics of the modern world around you, how does your own community's architecture measure up to this ancient blueprint? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.